Zoro is a character in One Piece in which growth has never really been an issue. Some would argue the main issue with Zoro's growth is the fact that it's no way to really scale it. Of course, this ties into the long-running conversation that Zoro post timeskip hasn't really been pushed like we expected him to. If we boil it down, Zoro's toughest opponent so far has probably been Pika, and that's because Pika was running around the entire time. There was a slight scuffle with him, Gyukimaru, and Kamazo, however we saw how that ended, in which Gyukimaru interfered with the fight, and therefore Kamazo, who we now know to be Killer, spoiler alert, managed to strike Zoro, and people use that as a slight against Zoro, when in actuality he was fighting against two people. But at this point, how strong is Zoro really? How far is he from Luffy? Of course, the main topic today is how far he is from Luffy, but we're going to touch on a bunch of different things in regards to his growth and where he has to be by the end of Wano. And for these growth videos, we're going to touch on these after every arc. This is the first installment, so we're just catching up from the beginning of the series to now, but after every arc we're going to assess the Straw Hat's growth and see where they have to be to of course achieve their ultimate goal. First, Luffy becoming Pirate King, Zoro becoming the greatest swordsman, etc, etc. Oda from the beginning of the series tried to alter our perception of Zoro and paint him as a monster. When Alvida and her crewmates were talking about Zoro, they mentioned that Zoro is being held at the Marine's prison, but if he's the real thing, he'd probably have broken out by now, so that gave us some high anticipation for Roronoa Zoro. In regards to Zoro's strength back then, Luffy acknowledges that Zoro is a monster, and in his conversation with Kobe, you can tell he respects Zoro as a monster, but isn't intimidated by it. But in that small time of conversation between Luffy and Zoro, they clicked, because even though personality-wise they were nothing in common, their ideals and what they were chasing after seemed to align. If nothing else, whilst being captured at death's door, was still intent on chasing and fulfilling his dreams. And of course for Luffy, as we knew by that point, he didn't care if he had to die, he was going to become the Pirate King. It's also an interesting evolution of Zoro's dreams, ideals, and things he wants to fulfill, because before he really gets to know Luffy, he doesn't want to die because he had things he wants to achieve and fulfill. But the thing is, we know how that plays out as the story goes on. It's an interesting dynamic. However, out of all the Straw Hats, I think Zoro's will and intent to grow has been focused on than any of the other Straw Hats, except Luffy of course, because we have actual backstory of Zoro, and growth, strength, and progression has always been a part of his character. Zoro as a child, while training in the Way of the Sword, was so powerful he was able to defeat adults. However, he kept losing to his friend Kuina, but we saw his intent to grow. He wanted to sail and become the world's #1 swordsman. He did not want to lose. And of course, through his rivalry with Kuina and her second-guessing becoming the world's strongest swordsman, Zoro and her made an intense promise for one of them to become the world's greatest. And through this promise, Zoro has grown and broken through several barriers. Through Kuina's death, that only strengthened his ideals. His ambition was now above him. He was getting stronger not only for himself, but for Kuina. So at that point, upon meeting Zoro, death was not an option. Through that resolve, and even though Zoro did not want to become a pirate, he was so intent on becoming stronger and not dying, he accepted Luffy's request. Of course, Luffy was an interesting character to him, you can tell at that point. However, that promise and that ambition, that's what drove him to become a pirate. He was not ready to die. And of course, the story aligned his and Luffy's goals of becoming Pirate King and him becoming the world's greatest swordsman, and that created yet another reason for growth. Zoro's intent to grow was no more apparent than when he met Dracula Mihawk. Again, the promise to Kuina came up, and of course his ambitions. What Zoro versus Mihawk also taught us was that Zoro would never take a step back or back down from growing stronger. He said it himself that if he were to take a step back right now versus Mihawk, who could have pierced his heart at any time, he said that he would lose something very important to him, a promise or oath or whatever. It would be irreversibly broken. And of course he was talking about his promise to Kuina to become the world's strongest, and taking a step back for any reason would be trampling on that promise. Zoro was steadfast in his convictions, and as much as he wanted to be the world's greatest swordsman, trampling on that promise he equated to dying. As a matter of fact, he said he'd rather much die, and Mihawk acknowledges this conviction. He then is challenged by the current world's greatest to become stronger, to surpass him. Use that conviction, that ambition, that intent, that resolve to surpass the world's greatest swordsman. So including his promise to Kuina, Luffy's intent to become Pirate King, and now his challenge from Dracula Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman, Zoro had all these reasons to grow stronger. And we cannot forget Zoro's oath. The buildup of these three promises, these three ideals, Luffy, Kuina, and Mihawk. Until the day he fights Mihawk and he wins, he swears to never lose again. Conviction, ambition, and resolve. Let's jump forward a bit and let's get into Zoro's actual growth and not only his convictions and ambitions, because we could spend all day on that, because there's a bevy of Zoro doing different things to overcome different feats and different challengers to actually grow. But let's go to his fight versus Daz Bones. And of course, in that fight, Zoro was able to unlock the breath of all things and overcome Daz Bones. Even Daz Bones was surprised how much Zoro grew within that one fight. He wanted to be able to cut steel, and he learned in that fight to be able to cut steel. A part of Zoro's strength also comes from his swords. Wado Ichimonji, Shusui, and Sandai Kitetsu. Of course, Yubashiri was destroyed. And in regards to Zoro's swords, we know for him to get stronger, he's going to have to attain a level that Mihawk explained to him, or gave him some information on, which is achieving a black blade. Shusui is already a black blade, but we know that was because of Ryuma and not of Zoro's own merit. So for Zoro to get to the level of Mihawk, by time he gets there, he would have to have stained a sword in black of his own merit. We know Ryuma did it back then when he was the sword god. So for Zoro, that's a level he has to attain. With the information we got in regards to advanced arm and haki, and how in Wano there's a technique in which you can destroy your opponent from the inside out. How is this factored into swordsman and achieving the black blade? In his conversation with Gukimaru on the bridge, it seems like Zoro is not privy to how this is attainable, even though he trained with Mihawk and Mihawk said that he's not going to allow Zoro to drink until he achieves a black blade like his. This was giving Zoro the idea, but not telling him the full story, because of course, achieving a black blade through armament black or through armament haki, that's temporary. But a permanent black blade based on Gukimaru, it has to be forged through your experiences. As you go through your sword career, your blade achieves this level of black. So to honestly get to another level as a swordsman, Zoro first has to do this. But in regards to Zoro and Luffy, portrayal as far as pre-time skip, I think, had shown them to be on similar levels, that they were somewhat close to each other. Of course, the Rob Lucci thing kind of throws a wrinkle in that. But Zoro, of course, as he progressed, was able to unlock different forms. Of course, Ashura is a thing. But before we get to Zoro's demonic powers, let's skip forward again to this time, Water 7 and his lobby. Water 7, Zoro took on Rob Lucci for a brief moment and he got overwhelmed pretty easily. Everything that led up to his fight with Kaku was very important, but I think at some point it was overlooked, but it follows the theme of Zoro and his resolve to get stronger. Obviously, the stakes of Nico Robin being captured and saving her added to this fuel and this resolve. However, there are certain things in between that moment, again leading up to Kaku, that were important. First, his brief clash or fight with Ship Cutter T-Bone. Zoro acknowledged him as being strong, but with that resolve, he told him that if he didn't get out the way, he was going to overwhelm him, and that's what Zoro did. And T-Bone was known as a ship cutter. He was slicing ships in pieces, and Zoro easily overwhelmed him. First with Luffy, and I should have mentioned this in his growth video, but really quickly here, Luffy was overwhelmed by CP9. Like, they could sense the difference in their power, and Luffy was definitely trying back then. And a lot of people go back to Bluno versus Luffy and say, well, Gear 2nd was what really did it and was able to beat Bluno because of that. But even before that, even before Gear 2nd, Luffy had shown considerable improvement from back then, and much time hadn't passed at all. He was able to break his Takai pretty easily without using Gear 2nd. So in between that time, there was a slight bump. And again, I think this goes back to resolve. The stakes were higher, so they had to be stronger. And Zoro even reiterated those words by what he said after. Luffy was off on his own, so of course Nami was worried, and she said he's alone, so his life might, and of course might be in danger. And Zoro cuts her off and says, as we've gone through each island, all of us have been slowly getting stronger, even if we haven't realized it. He too, with every island he's visited, has overcome death. We don't have anyone in our group who would die so easily. Going back to them fighting CP9 earlier, and to now, of course, Zoro fought T-Bone. Luffy had been fighting all of those people at Enies lobby, a bunch of randoms, but his life was at stake. A lot was on the line. And of course, this is due to Haki blooming, and Haki essentially is will, so through sheer will and determination, they were getting stronger. I don't want to use this, but it's apt here. Plus Ultra. In Boku no Hero Academia, sometimes you have to go past 100% of your power, and that's called Plus Ultra. And for the Straw Hats, for certain situations, they have to go past their limits because their backs are against the wall. And in Enies lobby, that was clear. They went past their limits because they had to. Enies Lobby, even though it was an arc of power-ups, it showed us something. Remember when I talked about Zoro and his power level when he faced off against Rob Lucci and he got kicked into the chimney and was stuck there, and he fought T-Bone, fought hundreds of different soldiers at Enies Lobby, and then he got to Kaku, right? And Kaku said he hadn't seen Zoro's real skill and he regretted it. And Zoro said, "I'm many levels stronger than I was before, so be careful." It had not been that long since Kaku saw Zoro in action. Zoro said, "I'm many levels stronger." So just in that period of time, Zoro had jumped many levels. The jump was obvious. And with the new power-ups and the new things they unlocked, I'm talking about Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, it showed that their growth had culminated to that point, and Zoro felt it coming. And Kaku even felt it. Kaku even said he could feel his ominous beast-like spirit. And even earlier in the arc, someone asked, based on how strong Zoro was, why was he not the captain? So Zoro's growth is well documented to be just as scary as Luffy's. I mean, Luffy just has fought stronger people, that's why he's grown more, but Zoro's potential for growth is on the same level as Luffy. Now in Zoro's fight versus Kaku, and with Kaku, Zoro was physically stronger than Kaku as it's shown in the fight, but with Kaku eating his devil fruit, it presented a different level of issue for Zoro because Kaku then had an unorthodox fighting style that Zoro had to adapt to. And Kaku was a skilled fighter himself, he was not a slouch, and again, adding the devil fruit made him even more powerful, he made his attacks more potent and more unpredictable. So Zoro had to figure all this out, and he was growing in that fight. You saw in that fight, he kept overcoming different things. And again, this hockey blooming thing, it was explained in Whole Cake Island, but this was what was occurring here in Enies Lobby or throughout the series for the Straw Hats. They were going through the series and they were getting stronger after every battle or during every battle, especially for one that's pushing them. And Kaku was one of the fights that absolutely pushed Zoro. Then again, through just sheer will to grow, Ashura was created. And Ashura, that's anyone's guess what exactly it is, but it is an embodiment of spirit based on the explanation we've gotten so far. And for Zoro, that immensely strong spirit led to him basically forming and creating an image, a demon spirit that Kaku could see, and that was able to overwhelm Kaku. The reason why I'm highlighting Enies Lobby so much is that this arc was the embodiment of what the Straw Hats go through, or their growth system. They go through not only one fight, but several fights in the arc. And a lot of people feel like they only grow through one fight, but they grow in each and every fight, each and every encounter. Of course, the major fights is where they grow the most, but for each fight, each near-death experience, it's somewhat like a Zenkai boost, but they grow and they learn different things. And for Zoro, that happened throughout Enies Lobby. Now, of course, as we progress to the time skip and him asking Mihawk for help and Mihawk training him with arm and haki, Zoro's determination to grow, it is not impeded or overshadowed by his loyalty to Luffy. They coincide, but his loyalty to Luffy and his captain's dream supersedes his. And we saw that when he was willing to die for Luffy by taking all of his damage on Thriller Bark. So with that limiter, right, and knowing that he could sacrifice it all for his captain at any time, fighting for his captain leads to even greater growth for him. Most of the Straw Hats are not that way. Again, they don't have the resolve and the intense determination to grow that Zoro does. All of their dreams aren't aligned with strength like his is. He wants to be the world's greatest swordsman, so essentially he has to get stronger, and not only for himself to achieve his dream, but to help Luffy achieve his dream, and to also overcome Mihawk, and to live up to his oath, and to live up to what Kuina expected of him. So it's a lot riding on their shoulders, and that leads to his overwhelming growth and overwhelming power. Finally, with Zoro and Wano, we haven't seen the best of him at all. Of course, again, the Gyukimaru thing, that's just a one-off because he was fighting two people essentially, and he fought versus Hawkins, but of course those are circumstantial things. But when push comes to shove, all those fights that Zoro has already had, right? Because I know people are saying Zoro is not commander level, he hasn't had the fights that Luffy has had, but Luffy has grown at an insane rate. But I think in Wano, with Zoro fighting actual swordsmen, it's going to help him grow even more because he's fighting people within the same, I guess, class, right? Kiyoshiro, of course, it seems like he's going to be one of Zoro's main adversaries, and I think he's going to fight Kiyoshiro and fight a commander by the end of the arc. And people saying that doesn't make sense, he's not that strong. I just showed you that Zoro jumped many levels in one arc, or 2 arcs if you include Water 7, whatever. But he was able to grow that much because he needed to. And for Zoro, I'm not sure if Oda's going to incorporate Kuina into the Wano arc, because of course we know Kuina died because she fell down some stairs, and for someone that was stronger than Zoro back then, crazy, right? However, Zoro, when the time comes, he will be able to call forth not only Ashura that we haven't seen post time skip, but also whatever strength is necessary to get the job done. There's too much riding on him to fail. He has to overcome whatever is in front of him. It's not only his dream at stake. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. As far as him and Luffy, it's shown that Luffy is clearly above Zoro. But for Zoro, I think the time is coming for him to show that he is going to be on Luffy's level or close to Luffy's level by the end of the arc. Of course, people are saying, well, Luffy fought Katakuri, he fought Cracker, and Luffy has grown from those. But again, we have not seen the full extent of Zoro's power post time skip, and I expect to see growth and then the full extent of what he can do by that point. But guys, let me know how you feel about it. What do you think Zoro's reasons to grow stronger are, and how far do you think he is from Luffy? And just give your overall thoughts on Zoro's strength throughout the story and of course post time skip. Thank you so much for your support. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you have not for more content like this. Check out my Patreon below, become a patron so you can vote on video ideas, and a like. I will be revamping a lot of the things come next week, so it's a lot to look forward to. So again, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.